The morning alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., just like every other day for the past 3 years. Denise Williams rolled over and silenced it with a practiced swipe. At 52, she had learned to appreciate routine. Her small apartment above the bakery smelled of fresh bread from downstairs, a comforting way to start each day. She pulled on her blue postal uniform, the same one she had worn for 3 years since moving to Millbrook. The small mountain town suited her perfectly after decades of adventure. No more sleeping in tents at high altitude. No more worrying about weather conditions on dangerous peaks. No more responsibility for other people's lives hanging in the balance. Just letters, packages, and peaceful walks through quiet neighborhoods. Denise had been a mountain guide for 25 years before retiring to this simple life. She had led countless expeditions up challenging peaks, taught rock climbing to beginners, and rescued more than a few hikers who had gotten themselves into trouble. Her hands still bore the calluses from years of handling ropes and climbing gear, though they had softened considerably since she started carrying mail instead of survival equipment. The mountains of her past weren't just geographical features. They were chapters in a story she preferred not to tell. She had guided families seeking adventure, executives needing challenges beyond boardrooms, and young people discovering their own strength. Each expedition had been a careful balance of risk and reward, where her expertise meant the difference between triumph and tragedy. The Millbrook post office opened at 7, and Denise was always there 15 minutes early. She liked the quiet time to sort through the day's deliveries and plan her route. The office was small, just her and Tom, the postmaster, who had been there for 30 years and knew everyone's business whether they wanted him to or not. "Morning, Denise," Tom called from behind the counter as she walked in. "Heavy load today. Got a bunch of packages for the Johnson farm, and Mrs. Patterson has another one of those medical deliveries." "No problem," she replied, pulling her long brown hair back into a ponytail. At her age, most people expected gray, but Denise had been blessed with genes that kept her looking younger than her years. The mountain sun had given her skin a weathered quality that spoke of outdoor experience, but her green eyes still sparkled with the alertness that had kept her alive on dangerous climbs. She loaded her truck methodically, checking addresses twice as she always did. Accuracy mattered in her current job just as much as it had in her previous one, though the consequences of mistakes were much less serious now. A misdirected package meant inconvenience, not death. Her truck was a reliable Ford with over 200,000 miles, painted regulation blue with the Postal Service eagle on the doors. She had customized it slightly with better mirrors for navigating narrow mountain roads and a first aid kit that was far more comprehensive than standard postal equipment. Old habits died hard. The route through Millbrook took her past the elementary school, where children waved from playground equipment made from recycled tires and painted bright colors. She waved back, remembering the days when she used to teach outdoor skills to youth groups. Those kids would be adults now, probably with children of their own, scattered across the country pursuing dreams that had been shaped in small part by wilderness experiences she had facilitated. Her first stop was always Mrs. Patterson's house on Elm Street. The elderly woman had moved to Millbrook after her husband's death 5 years ago, seeking the peace of a small community. She always had cookies ready and liked to chat about her garden, her late husband's military service, and the changing seasons. Denise didn't mind the extra few minutes these conversations required. In her guiding days, she had learned that rushing usually led to problems. "How are the roses doing this year?" Denise asked, handing over 3 letters and a small package containing prescription medication. "Oh, wonderful. Though I'm worried about that dead branch on the oak tree. It's hanging right over the power lines," Mrs. Patterson said, pointing toward her backyard with concern evident in her voice. Denise followed her gaze and immediately assessed the situation with the practiced eye of someone who had spent decades evaluating natural hazards. The branch was large, clearly dead based on the lack of leaves and the gray color of the bark, and positioned dangerously over electrical wires that supplied power to 3 houses. A strong wind could bring it down, causing power outages or potentially starting a fire. You should call the city about that, Denise advised. They'll send someone to remove it safely. Tree work near power lines requires special equipment and training. I keep meaning to, but you know how it is. They probably think I'm just a fussy old woman. Denise nodded sympathetically and made a mental note to call the city herself if Mrs. Patterson didn't follow through. Old habits from her guiding days died hard. She had always felt responsible for the safety of others, whether they were paying clients or simply neighbors who trusted her judgment. Your medication package feels lighter than usual, Denise observed, hefting the small box. Are you managing okay with your arthritis? Some days are better than others. Winter's always hard, but Dr. Martinez adjusted my prescription. I just worry about what happens if I can't take care of myself anymore. This was a conversation Denise had with several of her elderly customers. Millbrook was aging along with many small mountain communities, as young people moved to cities for work opportunities. The remaining population included many seniors who had chosen the area for retirement but were now facing the challenges of growing older in a place with limited services. You know, the community center offers a senior check-in program, Denise mentioned. Someone calls every day just to make sure you're okay. No cost, no obligation. Maybe I should look into that. The next several stops were routine, but each told a story. Mr. Walsh at the hardware store signed for a delivery of specialized screws. He was always working on restoration projects for the Historical Society. The library received a box of new books, including several hiking guides that would be popular with summer tourists. Young mothers collected packages while children played in front yards, their laughter carrying on the mountain air. Sarah Henderson, a single mother of 2, was waiting at her mailbox with obvious anxiety. She worked 2 jobs to support her family and rarely had time for casual conversation. "Everything okay, Sarah?" Denise asked, noticing the woman's tense posture. "I'm waiting for a letter from the school district. My son applied for the advanced program, and they said the results would come this week." Denise sorted through the mail for the Henderson address. "Here it is," she said, handing over an envelope with the school district return address. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Her face lit up with relief and joy. He got in. Tommy got into the advanced program. That's wonderful news. He's a bright kid. This could change everything for him. Better education, more opportunities. I never had chances like this growing up. Moments like these reminded Denise why she enjoyed her postal work. She wasn't just delivering mail. She was often the person who brought news that changed lives. Acceptance letters, birth announcements, love letters, business opportunities, all carried in her regulation blue truck through the winding roads of a small mountain community. It was nearly noon when Denise reached Oak Ridge Road, the most remote part of her route. The houses here sat on larger lots, separated by trees and rolling hills that caught and held morning mist long after the sun had climbed above the eastern peaks. She enjoyed this section because it reminded her of the mountain communities where she used to work as a guide, places where people chose isolation and self-reliance over convenience. The landscape here was classic Colorado high country. Pine and aspen forests broken by meadows that bloomed with wildflowers in summer and held snow well into spring. Rocky outcroppings provided habitat for mountain goats and occasional elk herds. It was beautiful, peaceful, and potentially dangerous for those who didn't understand mountain weather and terrain. The Henderson place was her second to last stop. James Henderson was 78 years old and lived alone since his wife passed 2 years ago from cancer. He had mobility issues following a stroke and used a wheelchair most of the time, but he was proud and independent. His house was a modest ranch-style building with wide doorways and ramps that his son had installed after the stroke. Denise always made sure to bring his mail directly to the door rather than leaving it at the roadside mailbox. It was a small courtesy that meant a lot to someone who had difficulty navigating his wheelchair across the uneven gravel driveway. As she pulled into the driveway, something felt wrong. Her guide instincts, dormant but never gone, suddenly sharpened. There was smoke coming from somewhere, though she couldn't immediately identify the source. The smell was distinct, not the pleasant wood smoke from a fireplace, but something more acrid and urgent. She grabbed the mail and walked quickly to the front door, scanning the area with the systematic attention to detail that had kept her alive in dangerous situations. The smoke was definitely coming from the house, though she couldn't see flames yet. She could hear something inside that sounded like an alarm beeping persistently. She knocked firmly on the door. "Mr. Henderson, it's Denise with your mail." No answer. She knocked again, harder this time, using the side of her fist to create more noise. Still no response, but she could hear something inside that made her blood run cold. A sound like crackling wood, and was that an alarm beeping? The smoke smell was getting stronger. Training kicked in automatically. In her guiding days, she had learned to assess emergency situations quickly and act decisively. Hesitation could mean the difference between life and death, whether on a mountain or in someone's living room. The front door was locked, which was typical for the area. But Denise's years in the mountains had taught her to always have backup plans and multiple exit strategies. She walked around to the back of the house, where sliding glass doors led to a small patio decorated with potted plants and outdoor furniture. Through the glass, she could see smoke beginning to fill the living room like a gray fog. The visibility was still good enough to make out furniture and doorways, but it was getting thicker by the minute. And there, in his wheelchair near the kitchen doorway, was Mr. Henderson. He appeared to be conscious but unable to move toward any exit. His face showed confusion and fear as he looked around at the increasing smoke. Denise tried the sliding door handle, locked as expected. She looked around the patio and spotted a decorative rock near some plants, a piece of local granite about the size of a softball that Mrs. Henderson had probably used as garden decoration. Without hesitation, she picked it up and smashed the glass door. The sound was sharp and loud, but necessary. Glass fragments scattered across the patio as smoke poured out through the broken door. The heat hit her immediately, and she could see orange flames beginning to spread from what appeared to be the kitchen area. The fire had started small, but was spreading rapidly through the older home. "Mr. Henderson," she called out, covering her nose and mouth with her shirt sleeve and stepping through the broken doorframe. He looked up at her with relief and fear mixed in his eyes. "I can't. The wheelchair won't?" He gasped, his voice weak from smoke inhalation. "It's okay," Denise said, her voice calm and controlled despite the dangerous situation developing around them. "I'm going to get you out of here." Years of mountain rescue training kicked in automatically. She assessed the situation quickly. Flames were spreading from the kitchen, but hadn't yet blocked their exit route through the living room to the broken sliding door. The smoke was getting thicker, which meant they had limited time before visibility became zero and breathing became impossible. The wheelchair appeared functional, and Mr. Henderson seemed alert enough to follow instructions. She moved behind his wheelchair and began pushing it toward the broken sliding door. The wheels moved smoothly on the hardwood floor, but they had to navigate around a coffee table, some chairs, and a magazine rack. Each obstacle cost precious seconds as the smoke thickened and the temperature rose. "Can you hold your breath for about 30 seconds?" she asked, as they approached the thickest smoke near the sliding door. Mr. Henderson nodded and took as deep a breath as his smoke-irritated lungs would allow. Denise did the same and pushed the wheelchair as fast as she could through the smoky living room. The wheels bumped over the door threshold, and suddenly they were outside in the fresh mountain air. Both of them immediately began coughing and gasping. The contrast between the smoky interior and the clean outdoor air was dramatic. But Denise knew they weren't safe yet. The fire was spreading rapidly, and she could hear windows beginning to crack from the heat inside the house. "We need to get further away," she said, pushing his wheelchair across the patio and onto the grass lawn, approximately 50 feet from the house. This distance would protect them from radiant heat and potential debris if windows exploded or the roof collapsed. Mr. Henderson was coughing but seemed otherwise unharmed. "How did you know?" he asked between coughs, his voice hoarse but grateful. "I saw smoke when I pulled up to deliver your mail," Denise explained, pulling out her cell phone to call 911. "Are you hurt anywhere? Any burns or injuries?" He shook his head while continuing to cough. "I was making lunch when something went wrong with the stove. The oil in the pan caught fire and it spread so fast to the curtains. I tried to get out, but the wheelchair got stuck on the rug edge, and then the smoke got so thick I couldn't see." Denise dialed emergency services while keeping one eye on the house. The flames were now visible through multiple windows, and smoke was pouring from gaps in the roof. The fire had moved beyond the possibility of being controlled by garden hoses or fire extinguishers. 911, what's your emergency? House fire at 1247 Oak Ridge Road. I've evacuated one resident, an elderly man in a wheelchair. Fire is spreading rapidly through the structure. We need fire department and paramedics immediately. Units are dispatched and en route. Are you both at a safe distance from the structure? Yes, we're about 50 feet away on the front lawn. Stay on the line until first responders arrive. Are there any other residents or pets in the structure? No other residents. Mr. Henderson, are there any pets inside? He shook his head. Mittens died last year. No pets, Denise reported to the dispatcher. While they waited, Denise stayed close to Mr. Henderson, monitoring him for signs of serious smoke inhalation. His breathing was becoming more regular, and his color was improving from the initial grayish pallor that had worried her. She had learned basic emergency medical assessment during her guiding career, when she might be hours away from professional help. "You saved my life," he said quietly, looking back at his house as flames began to consume the roof. "I just did what anyone would do," Denise replied automatically. But they both knew that wasn't entirely true. Not everyone would have noticed the subtle signs of smoke from the road. Not everyone would have broken a door without hesitation. Not everyone would have remained calm enough to execute a safe evacuation under pressure. Her mountain guide training had prepared her for exactly this type of emergency decision-making. The fire department arrived 8 minutes later, their sirens echoing off the mountain slopes. The lead truck was followed closely by an ambulance and 2 additional fire engines from neighboring departments. By the time they pulled into the driveway, flames were visible through most of the house's windows, and smoke was pouring from the roof in a thick, dark column that could be seen for miles. Paramedics immediately began checking both Denise and Mr. Henderson for smoke inhalation and other injuries. They administered oxygen through masks and took vital signs while firefighters began their attack on the blaze. "Ma'am, you did exactly the right thing getting him out when you did," said the lead paramedic, a young woman named Lisa. Another few minutes in that smoke could have been really serious for someone his age. Fire Chief Martinez approached Denise as his crew worked to contain the blaze. "You're the one who called it in and evacuated the resident?" "Yes. I'm the postal carrier for this route. Saw smoke when I pulled up and found Mr. Henderson trapped inside." "How did you get him out?" "The front door was locked, and he's wheelchair bound. Broke the sliding glass door in back and pushed him through the living room before the flames spread that far. Chief Martinez raised his eyebrows with professional appreciation. That was quick thinking and good execution. You probably saved his life. Kitchen fires in older houses like this can engulf a whole structure in minutes once they get started. Will he be okay? Paramedics say he's fine, thanks to your quick action. They're taking him to Valley General Hospital for observation, but that's just standard procedure for smoke exposure. His vital signs are good. As the paramedics loaded Mr. Henderson into the ambulance, he managed to wave at Denise despite the oxygen mask covering his face. "Thank you," he mouthed clearly. She waved back and watched the ambulance drive away, its red lights flashing as it navigated the winding road toward town. The fire department was making good progress on containing the blaze, but the house would clearly be a total loss. Tom arrived about 20 minutes later, having heard about the incident on his emergency scanner. As postmaster, he felt responsible for his employees' welfare, especially since Denise worked alone on remote routes. "Denise, are you all right?" he called out, parking his personal truck behind the fire engines. "I'm fine. Mr. Henderson is safe and on his way to the hospital for evaluation. That's what matters." "What the hell happened here?" She told him the complete story while they watched the firefighters finish their work. Tom listened with growing amazement, occasionally shaking his head at the description of her quick decision-making. "You know," he said when she finished, "most postal workers would have just called 911 and waited outside for the professionals to arrive. I couldn't just wait when I knew someone was inside who couldn't get out on his own. Where did you learn to handle an emergency situation like that? The broken door, the evacuation plan, staying calm under pressure? That's not exactly standard postal training." For the first time that day, Denise mentioned her previous life. "I used to be a mountain guide. Spent 25 years leading people up dangerous peaks. You learn to assess situations quickly and act when necessary, because hesitation can be fatal." Tom stared at her with surprise. 25 years? You never mentioned that before? "It was a different life. I retired 3 years ago and came here for some peace and quiet. Well, I'd say Mr. Henderson is pretty grateful you brought those skills with you to our quiet little town." The fire chief approached them as his crew finished packing up their equipment. The house was now a blackened shell, but they had prevented the fire from spreading to nearby trees or structures. "Miss Williams, we're going to need a formal statement from you for our report, but I wanted to thank you personally first. In 30 years of fighting fires, I've seen too many situations where people hesitated, panicked, or made poor decisions that cost lives. Your quick action and sound judgment definitely saved that man's life. I just did what needed to be done. That's exactly what I mean. You stayed calm, you assessed the situation correctly, and you acted decisively without putting yourself at unnecessary risk. Those are rare qualities, even among trained professionals." After giving her detailed statement and watching the fire trucks depart, Denise realized she still had mail to deliver. Her truck and the remaining packages had been unharmed, parked safely in the driveway away from the fire. "You're not seriously going to finish your route after all this?" Tom said with disbelief. "Mrs. Cooper is expecting her Social Security check. Mr. Barnes ordered medicine that needs to be refrigerated today. I can't just leave people without their mail because of one incident." Tom shook his head but smiled with admiration. "You're something else, Denise Williams." The final stop on her route was the Jameson house, where she delivered 2 packages and a handful of letters. Mrs. Jameson was working in her flower garden, wearing wide-brimmed hat and gardening gloves, unaware of the drama that had unfolded just a few miles away. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Mrs. Jameson called out cheerfully, looking up from her roses. Denise looked around at the peaceful neighborhood, with children playing in yards and birds singing in the pine trees. "From here, You couldn't even see the smoke column from the Henderson fire, which was already dissipating in the mountain breeze. Yes, she agreed, surprised by how normal everything felt after the morning's emergency. Beautiful day. That evening, Denise sat in her small apartment eating a simple dinner of pasta and vegetables while the local news played on her old television. She nearly choked on her food when the anchor began talking about a house fire on Oak Ridge Road. A quick-thinking postal worker saved the life of an elderly resident this afternoon when she noticed smoke and evacuated the man from his burning home. James Henderson, 78, was treated at Valley General Hospital and released. The postal worker, whose name has not been released, broke into the house and pushed Henderson's wheelchair to safety just minutes before the structure was fully engulfed in flames. The report showed aerial footage of the burned house taken from a news helicopter, along with an interview with Chief Martinez praising the unnamed postal worker's actions. There was no mention of her name or background, which suited Denise perfectly. Her phone rang during the commercial break. It was Tom. "You watching the news?" "Just saw it. Channel 7 called the post office asking for your name and contact information. They want to do an interview." "I'm not interested in interviews." "I figured you'd say that. I told them we don't give out employee information without permission, and that you probably wouldn't want to talk to reporters anyway." "Thank you for protecting my privacy." "Denise, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "Why did you really leave the mountain guiding business? 25 years is a long career to just walk away from, especially if you were good at it. And based on what I saw today, you were very good at it." Denise was quiet for a moment, watching the news report switch to a story about traffic construction on the interstate. She had never told anyone in Millbrook about her last day as a professional guide, the incident that had driven her to seek refuge in a small town where nobody knew her history. "I lost someone," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A client. He was experienced, followed all the safety protocols, did everything right. But sometimes the mountain decides things for you. Avalanche came out of nowhere. I got him out, but he didn't make it to the hospital. I'm sorry. That must have been devastating. After that incident, the responsibility for other people's lives became too heavy to carry. Every decision carried so much weight. Every risk assessment could mean life or death. I needed something simpler, more predictable. But today, you didn't hesitate to take responsibility for Mr. Henderson's life. That was different. He needed immediate help, and I was the only person there. I couldn't just walk away from someone in danger." "Maybe you're not as retired from helping people as you thought you were." After hanging up, Denise sat in her recliner and thought about Tom's observation. For 3 years, she had convinced herself that she was done with danger, done with life or death decisions, done with being responsible for others' safety and welfare. But when the critical moment came today, her instincts had taken over without hesitation. She had assessed the situation, made a plan, and executed it successfully. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt like her true self again. Competent, useful, necessary. The next morning brought an avalanche of phone calls from reporters, requests for interviews, and even a visit from the mayor's office wanting to give her a commendation for heroism. Denise politely declined all of it, explaining that she was just doing her job and didn't want publicity. She went to work at the usual time, loaded her truck with the day's mail, and started her route. But word had spread through the small town overnight like wildfire. At every stop, people wanted to talk about what had happened, to thank her, to express their admiration. "I heard you saved old Henderson's life," said Mr. Walsh at the hardware store, his voice filled with respect. "Saw it on the evening news," exclaimed Mrs. Patterson. "You're a real hero." "That was so brave of you," whispered the young mother on Maple Street, holding her toddler's hand. Denise accepted their praise politely, but tried to redirect conversations back to normal topics like weather, mail delivery schedules, and local community events. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who had simply done what was necessary in the moment. Her route took her past the Henderson house, now a blackened shell surrounded by yellow caution tape. She slowed down and looked at the damage in daylight. The back patio where she had broken the glass door was clearly visible, and she could trace the path they had taken to safety across the grass lawn. The timing had been crucial. If she had been even 5 minutes later arriving at the house, or if she had decided to just leave the mail at the roadside mailbox instead of walking to the door as she always did, Mr. Henderson might not have survived. Sometimes, she reflected, timing really is everything. That afternoon, she received an unexpected visitor at the post office. David Henderson, James's son, had driven up from Denver, where he worked as an engineer. "I wanted to thank you personally for what you did," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Dad told me the whole story from his hospital bed. The doctors said if he had been in that smoke much longer, the carbon monoxide poisoning could have been fatal. How is he doing now?" "Physically, he's fine. A little hoarse from smoke inhalation, but that should clear up in a few days. Emotionally, it's harder. The house is gone, and all his belongings, all the memories of Mom. It's devastating for him. He's staying with my family in Denver for now, while we figure out permanent living arrangements. I'm sorry about the house and his belongings. That must be heartbreaking." "Don't be sorry for anything. You saved the most important thing, his life. Dad's been independent his whole life, even after the stroke. The idea of asking for help has always been difficult for him, but he wanted me to tell you that you gave him his life back by not hesitating to break down that door." David reached into his jacket and handed her an envelope. "He wrote you a letter while he was in the hospital. He wanted to make sure you got it." Inside was a handwritten note on hospital stationery, written in the shaky but determined handwriting of an elderly man. "Dear Denise, I don't have adequate words to properly thank you for what you did yesterday. In my 78 years on this earth, I have met many people, but very few who would risk their own safety for a complete stranger without thinking twice about it. You are a remarkable woman with extraordinary courage, and I am honored to know you. The doctors tell me that a few more minutes in that smoke could have killed me. You literally gave me back my life. If you ever need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask. I will never forget what you did. With the deepest possible gratitude, James Henderson." Denise folded the letter carefully and put it in her uniform pocket, touched by his words. "Please tell him he's very welcome and that I hope he's comfortable staying with your family." "I will. And Denise, Dad mentioned that you used to be a mountain guide before becoming a postal worker. Is that true?" "Yes, for 25 years before I came here. That explains a lot about how you handled the emergency. He said you moved through that smoky house like you'd done rescues before. Very calm and professional. Different environment, same basic principles. Assess the situation, make a plan, execute it safely. Well, thank you for bringing those skills to our quiet little town. Who knows how many other people might benefit from having someone like you around." After David left, Denise finished her paperwork for the day and prepared to go home. But Tom stopped her at the office door. "I've been thinking about what you told me yesterday, about losing someone on a mountain climb and why you stepped away from guiding. Tom, hear me out, please. I know it was traumatic, and I understand why you stepped away from that life. But yesterday proved something important. You still have those skills, you still have the instincts, and more importantly, You still have the heart for helping people when they really need it. What are you getting at? Chief Martinez called this morning. The volunteer fire department is looking for new members, people with emergency response experience. He specifically asked if you might be interested after seeing how you handled the Henderson situation. Denise shook her head immediately. I'm done with all that. I came here to get away from life and death responsibilities. Are you really done with it? Because from where I stood yesterday, watching you break down that door and get that man to safety, you looked like someone who was exactly where they needed to be, doing exactly what they were meant to do. That was just one incident, one emergency situation. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was a reminder of who you really are underneath the postal uniform. I deliver mail, Tom. That's my job now. You deliver mail and you save lives and you notice things other people miss and you care about this community in ways that go far beyond your postal duties. Face it, Denise, you're not just a mail carrier. That evening, Denise took a longer walk than usual through the town. Millbrook was especially peaceful at sunset, with soft golden light filtering through the old oak trees that lined the residential streets. The sound of families eating dinner drifted from open windows, mixed with the distant laughter of children playing in backyards. She found herself walking past the fire station, where volunteers were cleaning equipment and preparing for the next emergency call. Through the open bay doors, she could see Chief Martinez talking with several firefighters about proper ventilation techniques during structure fires. He noticed her walking by and waved. Denise, how are you feeling today after yesterday's excitement? Fine, thank you. How's the investigation into the cause going? Pretty straightforward case. Grease fire on the stove got out of hand when Mr. Henderson tried to move the pan instead of turning off the heat and covering it. He couldn't move fast enough when it spread to the window curtains. These older houses go up quickly once fire gets started. If you hadn't come along when you did, someone else would have eventually. Maybe, but they didn't. You did. He paused, studying her face with professional interest. Tom mentioned you used to do mountain rescue work before coming here. That was a long time ago. Skills like that don't expire. They just need refreshing. We could really use someone with your training and instincts on our volunteer team. I appreciate the offer, but I'm happy with my current job. I'm not asking you to change careers. Just consider volunteering a few hours a week. Basic training is Thursday evenings, and we only respond to calls when you're available. No pressure, no mandatory commitments. Denise nodded politely and continued her walk, but Chief Martinez's words stayed with her as she explored the quiet streets of her adopted hometown. Over the next few days, she couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. Every time she delivered mail to houses with elderly residents, she found herself automatically assessing potential hazards with her trained eye. Dead tree branches that could fall on power lines, blocked exit routes that could trap people during emergencies, faulty electrical wiring that sparked concern, steep driveways that could be treacherous in winter ice. Her guide instincts were fully awake now, and she wasn't sure she could put them back to sleep even if she wanted to. The Henderson fire had been like a wake-up call, reminding her of capabilities and responsibilities she had tried to leave behind. Thursday evening came, and Denise found herself walking past the fire station again during training time. The volunteers were practicing ladder techniques and studying emergency medical procedures. She watched from across the street for several minutes, remembering her own training days in the mountains decades ago, learning to read weather patterns and avalanche conditions, understanding rope systems and anchor points, practicing rescue techniques over and over until they became second nature, muscle memory that could save lives when thinking time ran out. Chief Martinez came outside during a training break and spotted her watching. "You're welcome to join us," he called across the street. "No commitment required. Just come see what we do." Before she could talk herself out of it, Denise looked both ways and crossed the street. She walked into the fire station for the first time, breathing in the familiar smell of equipment and gear that reminded her of mountain rescue base camps. The training session that evening was focused on search and rescue techniques in residential structure fires. The volunteers were learning how to quickly evaluate a building's layout, identify the most likely locations where victims might be trapped, and execute safe extraction procedures under limited visibility conditions. It was remarkably similar to the mountain rescue protocols Denise had mastered over her long career. Different environment, different specific hazards, but the same core principles. Assess quickly, act decisively, always have multiple exit strategies planned. Never compromise your own safety to the point where you become another victim requiring rescue. Would you be willing to share your experience from the Henderson fire with the group? Chief Martinez asked. Sometimes real-world examples help more than textbook scenarios. Denise found herself standing in front of 12 volunteers, describing her actions step by step. As she talked through the decision-making process, she realized how naturally the old emergency procedures had come back to her, like riding a bicycle after years of not practicing. The key, she concluded, was not to overthink the situation. I saw smoke. I knew someone was inside who couldn't evacuate independently, so I found the safest way in and the most direct route out. Training and experience help you work through the fear and adrenaline to make sound decisions quickly. A young volunteer named Jake raised his hand. Weren't you scared when you broke that door and went inside? Fear is actually useful in emergency situations, as long as you don't let it paralyze you, Denise replied. It keeps you alert and careful, makes you pay attention to details that could save your life. But proper training and real experience help you work through the fear to do what needs to be done. After the training session, several volunteers approached her with questions about mountain rescue techniques and how they might apply to local emergency situations. They were eager to learn from someone with extensive field experience. "You're a natural teacher," observed Sarah Chen, a nurse who volunteered on weekends. "Have you ever considered sharing more of your mountain rescue experience with local groups?" "I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of responsibility again," Denise replied honestly. "Think about it, though. There are a lot of people in this area who hike, camp, and get themselves into trouble in the mountains every summer. The nearest professional rescue team is 2 hours away on good roads. Sometimes we need local expertise." Driving home that night, Denise realized that something fundamental had shifted inside her. For 3 years, she had been content with the simple routine of delivering mail and avoiding any responsibility for others' safety beyond basic courtesy. But the Henderson fire had awakened something that had been sleeping, not dead. The mountain guide part of her personality had been dormant, but it hadn't disappeared. The skills, the instincts, the drive to help people navigate dangerous situations safely, all of it was still there, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Maybe Tom was right. Maybe she wasn't as retired as she thought. The next day brought another unexpected visitor to the post office. Rebecca Torres, the high school principal, was waiting when Denise arrived for work. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced," Rebecca said. "I heard about what you did at the Henderson fire, and I have a request that might interest you." "What kind of request?" "Our students go on camping trips and hiking expeditions several times a year as part of our outdoor education program. We usually hire guides from Denver or Colorado Springs, but I was wondering if you might consider teaching some basic outdoor safety and rescue skills to our kids." "I'm not a certified teacher." "Maybe not in a classroom setting, but you clearly know how to keep people safe in dangerous situations. Our students could benefit enormously from learning those skills from someone with real-world experience." "I don't know if I'm ready to take on that kind of responsibility again." "Just think about it. We're planning a weekend camping trip next month to Pine Lake. Even if you just came along as a safety advisor, it would make me feel much more confident about taking 30 teenagers into the wilderness. That afternoon, as Denise delivered mail to the high school, she found herself walking past the gymnasium where students were practicing for upcoming outdoor education trips. She watched through the windows as they attempted to tie knots and set up basic camping equipment. Their technique was enthusiastic but sloppy, the kind of fundamental mistakes that could be dangerous in real wilderness conditions. Improperly secured tent stakes that would fail in wind, food storage methods that would attract bears, knots that looked right but would slip under load. She was still thinking about Rebecca's request when she arrived at her final stop of the day. Mrs. Patterson was waiting by her mailbox with a worried expression on her weathered face. "Denise, I called the city about that dead branch like you suggested, but they say it's not on city property, so it's not their responsibility. I can't afford to hire a professional tree service, and my grandson says it's too dangerous for him to try." Denise looked up at the branch, which seemed to be sagging even lower than before. A strong wind could definitely bring it down onto the power lines, potentially causing outages for the whole neighborhood. "Do you have a ladder?" she asked. "In the garage, but you can't seriously be thinking of climbing up there yourself." "I've done technical tree work before as part of trail maintenance. The key is taking it down in manageable sections and using proper rope techniques to control each piece." 20 minutes later, Denise was carefully positioned on an extension ladder with a handsaw, methodically cutting through the dead branch in sections small enough to control their fall. Mrs. Patterson watched nervously from below, while Denise used climbing rope to lower each piece safely to the ground. "Are you absolutely sure this is safe?" Mrs. Patterson called up. "I'm taking it down piece by piece and using a rope system to control each section," Denise explained while making her cuts. "The key is never to cut more than you can safely handle or let anything fall freely." The work brought back vivid memories of clearing avalanche debris and removing dangerous rockfall from climbing routes. Different tools and different specific hazards, but the same careful planning, the same attention to detail, the same methodical approach to managing risk. When the job was finished, Mrs. Patterson insisted on inviting her in for coffee and homemade cookies. "I can't thank you enough," the elderly woman said, pouring coffee into china cups. "I was so worried about that branch, especially with winter storms coming, but I didn't know who to turn to for help. I'm happy to help when I can. You know, word is getting around town about all the things you've been doing lately. Saving Mr. Henderson, helping at the fire station, and now this tree work. People are starting to realize we have someone very special living here. I just help out when I can. It's what neighbors do." "That's exactly what makes you special, dear. Most people are too busy with their own lives to notice when others need help, or they assume someone else will take care of problems." Driving home, Denise reflected on how drastically her quiet retirement had changed in just a few weeks. 3 weeks ago, she had been simply a postal worker who delivered mail and minded her own business, avoiding complications and responsibilities. Now she was being asked to join the volunteer fire department, teach outdoor skills to students, and take on community responsibilities she thought she had left behind forever when she retired from professional guiding. That evening, she pulled out a cardboard box she hadn't opened since moving to Millbrook 3 years ago. Inside were photographs, certificates, and mementos from her guiding career. Pictures of successful summit attempts with grinning clients. Thank you letters from grateful families. Professional awards for safety and excellence in outdoor education. At the bottom of the box was a photograph that always made her pause and remember. It showed her with Marcus Thompson, the client she had lost on her final expedition. They were standing together at base camp, both smiling confidently before beginning the climb that would end in tragedy. Marcus had been an experienced climber with proper equipment and training, careful and well prepared for the challenges ahead. But avalanches don't discriminate based on skill level or caution. The mountain had made its decision that day, and no amount of training, experience, or careful planning could have changed the outcome. For 3 years, Denise had carried the crushing weight of that loss, convinced that she had somehow failed in her fundamental responsibility to keep clients safe. But looking at the photo now, she remembered something Marcus had said during their pre-climb briefing. "I understand the risks involved," he had told her seriously. "I'm choosing to accept them because this challenge is important to me. If something happens to me up there, please don't blame yourself. I'm here because I want to be here, and I trust your expertise to give me the best possible chance of success." Maybe it was finally time to stop blaming herself for circumstances beyond her control and start remembering that some people choose to accept risks because they believe the potential rewards justify the dangers. Maybe her job wasn't to eliminate all possible risks, but to help people navigate dangerous situations as safely as possible while respecting their right to make informed choices. The next morning, Denise made 3 important phone calls before starting her mail route. First, she called Chief Martinez at the fire department. "I'd like to join the volunteer fire department and complete the certification training." Second, she called Rebecca Torres at the high school. "I'll help with your camping trip, and I can teach some basic outdoor safety classes if the school is interested in developing that program." Third, she called the regional search and rescue coordinator, a phone number she still remembered from her professional guiding days. "This is Denise Williams. I'm living in Millbrook now, and I'd like to volunteer for local rescue operations in the area." At work, Tom noticed her brighter mood and more energetic demeanor immediately. "You seem different today, more like yourself somehow." "I made some important decisions last night." "Good ones, I hope." "I think so. I'm going to start volunteering with the fire department and maybe teach some outdoor skills to local students and community groups." "That's fantastic. What finally changed your mind?" Denise thought carefully about the question as she loaded her truck with the day's mail deliveries. "I realized I was hiding from who I really am instead of learning and growing from what happened in my past. Yesterday, Mrs. Patterson needed help with a dangerous tree situation, and I had the skills and experience to solve her problem safely. Mr. Henderson needed help escaping from that fire, and I had the training to get him out alive. Maybe instead of running away from responsibility for others' safety, I should be using my knowledge and abilities to help people be safer and more prepared." That sounds like the Denise Williams who didn't hesitate to break down a door to save a stranger's life. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm finally ready to be that person again. Her mail route that day took on a completely different quality and meaning. Instead of just mechanically delivering letters and packages, she found herself really observing the houses and properties she visited, noting potential hazards that could be addressed before they became emergencies, thinking about access routes for emergency vehicles, observing which residents might need extra assistance during crisis situations. At the elementary school, she stopped to talk with the principal about starting an after-school program focused on basic outdoor safety for children. At the public library, she discussed setting up educational displays about wilderness preparedness and emergency readiness for families. By the end of her workday, she had volunteered for more community activities and responsibilities than she had participated in during her entire 3 years of quiet retirement in Millbrook. That evening's fire department training session focused specifically on rope rescue techniques for extracting victims from difficult locations. Denise found herself demonstrating knots and anchoring systems that the other volunteers had only read about in training manuals. "Where exactly did you learn all these advanced rope techniques?" asked Mike Patterson, a volunteer who worked at the local bank during regular business hours. 25 years of professional mountain guiding. You learn every possible knot system and safety technique because people's lives depend on your knowledge being absolutely reliable and comprehensive. Would you be willing to lead some specialized training sessions on advanced rope work and technical rescue procedures? Before she could hesitate or second guess herself, Denise nodded confidently. Absolutely. We could start with basic principles and work our way up to more complex rescue scenarios. I think this group has the potential to handle some fairly sophisticated techniques. Chief Martinez pulled her aside after the training session concluded. I'm really glad you decided to join our team, but I have to ask, what specifically made you change your mind about getting involved again? I finally realized I was letting one tragic incident define my entire future direction. Yes, I lost a client on my final professional expedition. Yes, it was devastating and traumatic. But that single tragedy doesn't erase 25 years of successful rescues, safe expeditions, and lives saved. If I have skills and knowledge that can help people in this community, I should be using them constructively. What exactly happened on that final climb, if you don't mind me asking? Sudden avalanche in conditions that seemed safe based on all available information. My client was experienced, well-trained, and followed all proper safety protocols. But sometimes natural forces make decisions that are completely beyond human control. I got him out of the debris field alive, but he died from internal injuries before we could get him to medical facilities. So you actually did everything right, but the outcome was still tragic. Exactly. I spent 3 years thinking I had somehow failed in my responsibilities, but the reality is that I had done everything humanly possible under extremely difficult circumstances. The final outcome wasn't within my control to determine. That's an incredibly difficult lesson to learn and accept. It is. But I think I'm finally ready to separate what I can reasonably control from what I simply can't, and focus my energy on the areas where I can actually make a positive difference. The following Saturday, Denise participated in her first official search and rescue operation since retiring from professional guiding. A teenage hiker had gotten lost on one of the popular day-use trails outside town, and his family had called police when he failed to return by the expected time. Denise joined a coordinated team of 6 volunteers from various local agencies. Her role was to help plan the search pattern and provide expert guidance on the most likely locations where a lost hiker might seek shelter or become stranded. Based on the trail description, weather conditions, and the hiker's estimated skill level, she explained to the search team leader, he most likely took shelter somewhere with natural wind protection when he realized he was lost. There are 3 high-probability locations within reasonable walking distance of where he was last seen by other hikers. They found the missing teenager at the second location they checked, cold and frightened but physically unharmed. He had left the marked trail to get a better view for photographs and had become completely disoriented when afternoon fog rolled in and reduced visibility to just a few yards. I knew someone would eventually come looking for me, he told Denise as they walked back toward the trailhead together. But I was starting to get really scared that I might have to spend the night out here. You did exactly the right thing by staying in one place once you realized you were lost. Moving around in poor visibility conditions just makes the situation worse and increases the search area. Are you a professional rescue person? I used to be, many years ago. Now I just volunteer when people need help in situations where I might be useful. The successful rescue felt different from her professional guiding days. There was less pressure and stress because she wasn't solely responsible for the outcome or the safety of paying clients. At the same time, it was more personally satisfying because she was choosing to help rather than fulfilling professional obligations. Sunday morning brought another unexpected opportunity. Rebecca Torres called with an urgent request that would test Denise's renewed commitment to outdoor education. I know this is extremely short notice, but we have a serious problem with next week's camping trip. The professional guide we hired from Denver got sick and had to cancel, and the trip is supposed to start this coming Friday. Would you be willing to step in as the lead instructor? How many students are we talking about? 18 junior and senior students plus 2 other teachers as chaperones. We'll be camping at Pine Lake for 3 days and 2 nights. Pine Lake was very familiar territory to Denise. She had guided dozens of expeditions to that area during her professional career and knew the terrain, weather patterns, and potential hazards intimately. What's the general skill and experience level of the students? Very mixed group. Some have significant camping and hiking experience from family trips, while others have never spent a night outdoors in their lives. We were planning to focus on basic camping skills, nature education, and some relatively easy day hiking. I can definitely handle that, but I'd like to add some practical safety and emergency preparedness instruction to the curriculum. These students should learn basic first aid techniques and fundamental wilderness survival skills. That sounds perfect. That's exactly the kind of real-world education we were hoping to provide. The week flew by as Denise prepared comprehensively for the camping expedition. She created detailed lesson plans, gathered and organized all necessary equipment, and coordinated logistics with the other teachers. It felt both familiar and exciting to be planning a wilderness expedition again, even a relatively simple one. Friday morning arrived bright and clear. Denise met the group at the school parking lot where 18 teenagers with varying levels of enthusiasm were loading gear into a chartered bus. 2 other teachers looked nervous about the upcoming wilderness experience, clearly more comfortable in traditional classroom environments. Before we leave town, Denise announced to get everyone's attention. Everyone needs to understand and agree to follow some basic safety rules. Stay with the designated group at all times, follow all instructions immediately and completely, and speak up immediately if you're having any kind of problem or concern. The wilderness is beautiful and educational, but it can be dangerous if you're careless or ignore safety protocols. One student, a confident-looking boy named Tyler, raised his hand with a slightly skeptical expression. How dangerous could it really be? We're just car camping for a weekend. Let me tell you about a rescue I participated in a few years ago, Denise replied seriously. An experienced hiker with over 20 years of camping experience stepped off a marked trail for just a few seconds to avoid some poison ivy. He tripped over a hidden tree root, fell into a small ravine, and broke his ankle. If his hiking partner hadn't been there to go for help immediately, he could have died from exposure and dehydration before anyone found him. Tyler's smirk faded quickly, and the other students began listening more carefully to her words. The important point is, Denise continued, accidents and emergencies can happen to anyone, regardless of experience level or how careful they think they're being. Our job is to minimize unnecessary risks and be fully prepared for emergency situations. The drive to Pine Lake took 2 hours through winding mountain roads that climbed steadily into higher elevation forests. Denise used the travel time to teach the students about reading topographic terrain, identifying weather patterns, and understanding how altitude changes affect human physiology and equipment performance. When they reached the designated campsite, she supervised the setup process very carefully. Each tent had to be positioned correctly for proper drainage and wind protection. Food storage required following specific procedures to avoid attracting potentially dangerous wildlife. Even something as seemingly simple as choosing the optimal location for the campfire involved multiple important safety considerations. "Why can't we just put the fire pit anywhere we want?" asked Sarah, a student who clearly preferred indoor activities to outdoor adventures. "See how the wind is blowing directly toward those pine trees?" Denise pointed to a cluster of tall evergreens about 30 feet away. Sparks and embers could easily reach them and start a serious forest fire. We need to position our fire where the prevailing wind will blow sparks toward open ground or the lake. By evening, the campsite was properly established according to leave no trace principles, and the students were beginning to settle into outdoor life. Some adapted quickly to the absence of electric lighting and cell phone service, while others struggled with the adjustment to a more primitive environment. Around the evening campfire, Denise shared carefully chosen stories from her guiding career, emphasizing important safety lessons without frightening the students unnecessarily. I once had a client who insisted on attempting a challenging hike wearing brand new boots that he had never tested, she told them. By the end of the first day, his feet were completely covered in painful blisters. By the second day, he could barely walk at all. We had to abort the entire expedition and arrange for emergency helicopter evacuation. "What's the main lesson we should learn from that?" asked Amy, one of the more engaged and thoughtful students. Never try new equipment for the first time on a real expedition or camping trip. Boots, backpacks, sleeping bags, rain gear, everything should be familiar, comfortable, and thoroughly tested before you depend on it in actual wilderness conditions. The first night passed without any significant incidents, though Denise barely slept at all. She found herself automatically listening for sounds that might indicate developing problems. Students leaving their tents without permission, wildlife approaching the camp area, or weather changes that could pose potential dangers. Old professional habits, she realized. Even after 3 years away from guiding responsibilities, her protective instincts remained sharp and constantly alert. Saturday morning began with hands-on lessons in outdoor cooking techniques and water purification methods. The students were surprised and sometimes frustrated by how much careful planning was required for tasks that seemed simple at home. "Why can't we just drink directly from the lake?" Tyler asked, looking at the crystal clear mountain water. "It looks perfectly clean." "Clear water doesn't necessarily mean safe water," Denise explained patiently. "Even pristine-looking natural water sources can contain bacteria, parasites, or chemical pollutants that will make you seriously ill. Always purify water from any natural source, regardless of appearance." She demonstrated several different purification methods: boiling, iodine tablets, and portable filtration systems. Each method had specific advantages and disadvantages depending on the particular situation and available resources. The afternoon hiking expedition was planned as a gentle introduction to backcountry travel skills. The trail to Eagle Point Overlook was well marked and offered spectacular scenic views without requiring technical climbing abilities or extreme physical fitness. But 20 minutes into the hike, Denise's experienced guide instincts went on high alert. Dark storm clouds were building rapidly over the western peaks, and the wind patterns were shifting in ways that strongly suggested severe weather approaching much faster than originally forecasted. She called for an immediate group stop and gathered all the students in a small clearing beside the trail. "We need to have a serious discussion about weather conditions," she announced, pointing toward the approaching storm clouds. "Look carefully at those clouds and tell me what you observe." Most of the students looked at the towering thunderheads with casual curiosity rather than concern. A few noticed that the clouds appeared to be getting darker and more ominous. "Looks like it might rain pretty hard," offered Jessica with a shrug. "Maybe we should head back to camp," suggested one of the teachers nervously. Denise nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the right decision. Those storm clouds are moving much faster than normal weather patterns, and the wind direction changes suggest we could have severe weather with lightning, heavy rain, and possibly hail within the next hour. In mountain environments, sudden storms can be extremely dangerous if you're caught in exposed locations." "But we haven't reached Eagle Point yet," Tyler complained loudly. "The whole point of this hike was to see the scenic view from up there." "The primary point of this expedition is to learn outdoor skills and safety principles in a controlled environment," Denise replied firmly. "Right now, The most important skill you can learn is recognizing when conditions require changing your original plans to maintain safety margins. As if to emphasize her point dramatically, thunder rumbled ominously in the distance, echoing off the surrounding mountain peaks. Everyone stay together in a tight group as we return to camp, Denise instructed. Keep your rain gear easily accessible, and if the storm hits us before we reach the campsite, we'll take immediate shelter and wait for conditions to improve. The return trip became an unplanned but valuable lesson in weather survival techniques. 15 minutes from camp, the rain started as scattered drops. By the time they reached the tents, it had developed into a steady downpour with gusty winds. "Everyone into the main group shelter tent immediately," Denise called out over the increasing noise of rain and wind. "Leave your wet outer gear in the vestibule area." The large communal tent that served as their outdoor dining and activity area became a cozy refuge from the storm. 18 students, 2 teachers, and Denise crowded together while the weather raged outside their nylon walls. "This is actually kind of exciting," admitted Sarah, who had been skeptical about the entire camping experience. "It feels like we're real pioneers or something." Native American peoples survived weather like this for thousands of years without modern equipment, Denise said. They understood that wilderness survival often depends on patience, preparation, and adapting to conditions rather than fighting against them. The storm lasted almost exactly 2 hours. When it finally passed and moved on toward the eastern valleys, the students emerged to find their campsite completely transformed. Puddles of water everywhere, gear soaked despite their best protective efforts, and a general sense that they had experienced something genuinely challenging and real. "Everyone needs to check their sleeping gear carefully," Denise announced. "Wet sleeping bags can be dangerous in cold mountain weather. We'll need to dry everything thoroughly before tonight." The afternoon became an intensive lesson in improvisation and collaborative problem solving. Some sleeping bags had gotten wet and needed to be dried by the revived campfire. Cooking equipment required thorough cleaning after being exposed to rain and mud. Even simple tasks like relighting the campfire became more complex with wet wood and damp kindling. But the students rose impressively to meet these challenges. They worked together effectively, shared dry gear with classmates whose equipment had failed, and showed resourcefulness and resilience that surprised their teachers. "I never realized that camping could be so complicated and require so much problem solving," Tyler admitted to Denise as they worked together to restore the campsite to functional condition. "It's not necessarily complicated if you're properly prepared and pay careful attention to changing conditions," she replied. "The serious problems usually come when people underestimate their environment or ignore obvious warning signs. Like when you made us turn back from the Eagle Point hike?" "Exactly. I've seen very experienced climbers get caught in dangerous storms because they were so focused on reaching their planned destination that they ignored clear weather warnings. Sometimes the smart decision looks like the disappointing decision." That evening, the mood around the campfire was noticeably different from the first night. The students had experienced real wilderness conditions and had worked together successfully to overcome significant challenges. They asked more serious and thoughtful questions about outdoor survival techniques and listened more carefully to Denise's detailed answers. "What's the most frightening situation you've ever encountered as a professional guide?" asked Amy. Denise considered the question very carefully. She could tell them about technical rescues, severe weather emergencies, or equipment failures, but she decided to share something more personally meaningful. "The most frightening situation wasn't necessarily the most physically dangerous," she said thoughtfully. "It was a situation where I had to make a decision that I knew would deeply disappoint someone, but was absolutely necessary for their safety." She told them about a client who had trained intensively for months to climb a particularly challenging peak, only to be turned back just a few hours from the summit due to rapidly deteriorating storm conditions. He was absolutely furious with me, she continued. Said I was being overly cautious and that we definitely could have made it to the top and back down safely. He was probably right. We might very well have reached the summit and returned without serious problems. But might isn't good enough when you're responsible for someone else's life and safety. Did he ever forgive you for that decision? Asked Jessica, with genuine curiosity. Actually, yes. About 2 years later, he sent me a letter saying he had learned to appreciate the important difference between taking calculated risks based on careful assessment and taking stupid risks based on wishful thinking or ego. He thanked me for teaching him that crucial distinction. What exactly is the difference between those two types of risks? Tyler asked. Calculated risks are based on thorough assessment of current conditions, available equipment, skill levels of everyone involved, and comprehensive backup plans for various contingencies. Stupid risks are based primarily on hope, ego, or deliberately ignoring obvious warning signs because they interfere with what you want to do. Sunday morning brought the final educational components of the camping experience. Breaking camp properly according to leave no trace principles, emergency signaling techniques for attracting rescue assistance, and basic wilderness first aid procedures. Why is it so important to pack out absolutely everything we brought, even tiny pieces of trash? Asked one student as they meticulously cleaned the entire campsite. Because wilderness areas like this are shared community resources, Denise explained. Every group that comes here after us has the right to find it exactly as beautiful and unspoiled as we did when we arrived. Plus, human waste and garbage can seriously harm wildlife and contaminate water sources that other people and animals depend on. The process of properly breaking camp took significantly longer than the students had expected, but they approached it with the same spirit of cooperation and attention to detail they had shown during the storm emergency. As they loaded the chartered bus for the return trip to town, Rebecca Torres pulled Denise aside for a private conversation. "This has been absolutely incredible," the principal said with obvious enthusiasm. "The students have learned more practical life skills in 3 days than they usually do in months of traditional classroom instruction. Would you seriously consider doing more programs like this on a regular basis? What exactly did you have in mind? Regular outdoor education classes during the school year, maybe additional weekend camping trips for students who want more advanced wilderness training? We could even develop a specialized wilderness leadership program for seniors who are interested in that career path." Denise looked back at the students, who were excitedly comparing photographs and already making plans for future camping trips with their families and friends. "Let me think seriously about that possibility," she said. The drive back to Millbrook was filled with animated conversation as students processed and discussed their weekend experience. Many talked enthusiastically about planning camping trips with their families. Others asked specific technical questions about outdoor equipment and advanced safety procedures. "Miss Williams," Tyler called from the back of the bus, "do you think I could learn to be a professional mountain guide like you used to be? It requires years of intensive training, extensive practical experience, and continuous education," Denise replied. "But if you're serious about pursuing that career path, start by taking basic outdoor skills courses and work your way gradually up to more advanced training. The most important quality for any guide is always putting safety considerations above personal goals or client expectations." Back in Millbrook, news of the successful camping expedition spread rapidly through the small town's efficient communication networks. Parents called to thank Denise personally for teaching their children valuable life skills. Students stopped by the post office to show her photographs and ask detailed follow-up questions about wilderness techniques. Tom noticed the dramatic change in his employee immediately. You look like someone who just remembered what they truly love doing most. Maybe I have, Denise admitted with a smile. So what comes next? More camping trips? Fire department training? Search and rescue operations? All of those things, I think. I spent 3 years trying to avoid any responsibility for other people's safety and welfare. But this weekend, I remembered that helping people safely navigate challenges they couldn't handle alone is exactly what I'm naturally good at. More importantly, it's what this community genuinely needs. What specifically made you change your perspective so dramatically? Watching those teenagers work together during the storm, seeing them learn to make smart decisions about risk assessment and safety priorities, remembering why I originally became a mountain guide in the first place. Which was what, exactly? To help people safely experience places and challenges that would be impossible for them to handle independently. I thought losing one client meant I had fundamentally failed at that mission, but I'm finally beginning to understand that losing Marcus actually meant the mountain had made a decision that was completely beyond my ability to control or influence. That evening, Denise called the regional search and rescue coordinator again with a more specific commitment. This is Denise Williams in Millbrook. I called several weeks ago about volunteering for local rescue operations, and I'm ready to make a firm commitment. We actually have a developing situation right now, if you're available and willing to respond immediately. What kind of situation? 2 experienced rock climbers are overdue on Bear Creek Canyon. They were scheduled to return yesterday evening, and family members are concerned. Weather conditions are deteriorating rapidly, and we need someone with advanced technical climbing skills to assist the search team. Denise looked out her apartment window at the darkening sky. Storm clouds were building over the mountains again, just like during the camping trip with her students. I can be at the staging area in 30 minutes, she said without hesitation. As she gathered her personal climbing gear from storage, Denise felt the familiar pre-mission focus settling over her consciousness. Weather assessment, route planning, equipment inspection, all the detailed procedures she had performed hundreds of times during her professional guiding career. But this mission felt fundamentally different from her old job. She wasn't being paid to keep people safe or fulfilling contractual obligations to paying clients. She was choosing to help because she had specialized skills that were needed and a community that had become important to her. The rescue staging area presented a familiar scene. Emergency vehicles with flashing lights, concerned family members, and a professional team preparing for complex operations in challenging conditions. Denise Williams, she introduced herself to the incident commander. I'm the volunteer with extensive climbing experience. Thank God you're here, the commander replied with obvious relief. We have 2 climbers stranded on a ledge approximately 200 feet up the north face of Bear Creek Wall. They're not seriously injured as far as we can determine from shouted communication, but weather is closing in rapidly, and the rock surface will become extremely slippery and dangerous soon. Denise studied the topographic maps and digital photographs of the climbing area carefully. The route was technically challenging, but well within her skill and experience level. More importantly, she knew this particular climbing area intimately from her guiding days. I can reach them safely, she said with quiet confidence. But we need to move immediately. That incoming storm system will make the rescue exponentially more complicated and dangerous if we're still on the rock face when it arrives. How much time do you need for a complete rescue? 2 hours to reach their position, secure them properly with safety systems, and get everyone down to ground level safely. That's assuming everything goes according to plan and we don't encounter unexpected complications. And if things don't go according to plan? Denise looked at the approaching storm clouds, automatically calculating wind speed, precipitation probability, and temperature drop potential based on decades of mountain weather experience. Then we adapt our techniques and find alternative solutions. But we absolutely cannot leave anyone on that exposed rock wall overnight in these weather conditions. That would be a death sentence. The technical rescue operation proceeded smoothly and professionally. Denise reached the stranded climbers, secured them with appropriate safety systems, and guided them down to the base of the cliff, just as the first serious raindrops began to fall from the storm clouds. Both climbers were experienced and well prepared, but had been caught off guard by a climbing route that proved more technically challenging than guidebook descriptions had suggested. They were grateful, tired, and slightly embarrassed by needing rescue assistance. "Thank you so much," said Maria, the female climber, as they reached safe ground. "We knew someone would eventually come looking for us, but we were getting genuinely scared up there as the weather got worse. You made the right decision staying put on that secure ledge instead of trying to continue climbing or descend in conditions you weren't completely confident about," Denise replied. "That ledge provided safe shelter until professional help could reach you." "Are you a professional rescue climber?" asked her partner Dave. "I used to be a professional mountain guide. Now I just volunteer when people need help in situations where my experience might be useful." As the rescue team packed up their technical equipment, the incident commander approached Denise with obvious admiration. "That was absolutely textbook perfect," he said. "Quick assessment, efficient execution, completely safe for everyone involved. We could definitely use someone with your level of skill and experience on a regular basis." "I'm very interested in continuing to volunteer." "There's a comprehensive training and certification course next month for technical rescue specialists. If you complete that successfully, you'd be qualified to participate in rescue operations throughout the entire region." Driving home through the steady rain, Denise reflected on how dramatically her life and sense of purpose had transformed in just a few weeks. A month ago, she had been a simple postal worker who carefully avoided anything more challenging or complicated than delivering mail safely. Now she was teaching wilderness skills, volunteering with the fire department, and participating in technical rescue operations. But rather than feeling overwhelmed or pressured, she felt more like her authentic self than she had in years. It didn't feel like she had changed into a different person. It felt like she had finally stopped hiding from who she had always been underneath the protective shell of routine and isolation. The next morning brought yet another call from Rebecca Torres with an expanded proposal. "I have a significant proposition for you," the principal said. "The school board met in emergency session last night and approved funding for a completely new position, Director of Outdoor Education. It would be part-time initially, coordinating perfectly with your postal work, but it would formalize and expand all the teaching and program development you've been doing." What would the position involve specifically? Comprehensive curriculum development, instructor training for other staff members, expedition leadership, safety oversight for all outdoor school activities throughout the district. Basically, everything you're already doing naturally, but with official administrative support, proper resources, and appropriate compensation. "I need some time to think about such a major commitment." "Of course, take all the time you need. But Denise, what you've brought to our students and our entire community in just a few weeks has been absolutely remarkable. We want to make sure we can continue benefiting from your expertise and dedication for years to come." After ending the call, Denise sat in her small apartment and looked again at the cardboard box of photographs and mementos from her professional guiding career. 3 weeks ago, opening that box had been emotionally painful, filled with memories of failure and overwhelming loss. Now, it looked like a treasure chest of valuable experiences and hard-won knowledge that could benefit many others. She pulled out a favorite photograph from one of her most successful expeditions, a summit attempt with a diverse group of college students who had trained intensively for months to attempt their first major peak. Their faces in the photo showed exhaustion, triumph, and profound gratitude. At the bottom of the photo, one of the students had written in faded ink, "Thank you for keeping us safe and helping us achieve something we never thought was possible." Maybe that message captured what she was really meant to do with the rest of her life. Not avoid responsibility and risk, but embrace them in ways that honored both her hard-earned skills and her community's genuine needs. She picked up her phone and called Rebecca Torres back without further hesitation. "I accept the position," she said firmly. "When would you like me to start?" "How about immediately? We have a group of teachers who desperately want wilderness first aid certification, and I was hoping you could design and lead the entire training program." "I can definitely do that. And Denise, thank you. You're giving our students and our community opportunities they never would have had otherwise." That afternoon, as Denise completed her regular postal route, she noticed countless details she had never observed before. The way late afternoon light illuminated the mountains surrounding Millbrook. The network of potential hiking trails that could connect the town to pristine wilderness areas. The large number of young people who could benefit significantly from outdoor education programs and older residents who could share their own knowledge of local environmental conditions. By evening, she had outlined a comprehensive outdoor education program that could serve the entire community effectively. Basic skills classes for beginners, advanced wilderness training for experienced outdoor enthusiasts, specialized safety courses for families with children, and leadership programs for seniors who wanted to remain active and engaged. Her quiet retirement had evolved into something she had never planned, but that felt completely natural and purposeful. 6 months later, Denise stood before a group of new volunteer firefighters, demonstrating advanced rope rescue techniques with the confidence of someone who had found her true calling. In the audience were several of her former camping trip students, now trained in wilderness first aid and serving as junior instructors for younger participants. The Millbrook Outdoor Education Center had grown from a simple idea into a thriving regional program that attracted participants from neighboring towns and even urban areas. The local search and rescue team had responded to dozens of successful missions, with Denise serving as technical specialist for the most challenging and dangerous operations. Her postal route continued as always, but now it served multiple important purposes. She used her daily travels throughout the community to identify potential safety hazards before they became emergencies, check regularly on elderly residents who might need assistance, and stay personally connected with the people she served in various capacities. "Do you have any regrets about giving up your quiet retirement?" Tom asked one afternoon as they sorted mail together at the post office. Denise looked out the window at a group of teenagers practicing technical climbing techniques on the training wall she had convinced the city to install behind the fire station. "The only regret I have is waiting so long to remember who I really am," she said thoughtfully. "And who is that exactly?" "Someone who helps people safely experience challenges they couldn't handle alone. Someone who uses specialized knowledge and practical skills to make her community stronger, safer, and more resilient. Someone who finally learned that avoiding responsibility isn't the same as avoiding risk. It's just avoiding purpose and meaning." That evening, Denise received a letter that had been forwarded through several addresses over many months before finally reaching her. The return address was both familiar and completely unexpected. Inside was a carefully handwritten note from Jennifer Thompson, Marcus's younger sister. "Dear Denise, I hope this letter eventually finds you in good health and spirits. It has taken me almost 3 years to locate your current address, but I felt it was crucially important to reach out to you directly. I wanted you to know with absolute certainty that our entire family has never blamed you for what happened to Marcus during that final expedition. He died doing exactly what he loved most, with someone he trusted and respected completely. His detailed journals from the expedition are filled with admiration for your skill, professionalism, and unwavering dedication to safety under extremely difficult conditions. The avalanche was a natural disaster, not a failure on anyone's part. I sincerely hope you haven't spent these years blaming yourself for something that was entirely beyond anyone's control. Marcus would want you to continue sharing your knowledge and helping others experience the mountains safely. He truly believed that exceptional guides change people's lives by showing them what they're actually capable of achieving. Please don't let his accident prevent you from continuing that vitally important work. With deep gratitude for everything you did for my brother and sincere hope for your future happiness, Jennifer Thompson. Denise read the letter 3 times, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. For 3 years, she had carried crushing guilt that Marcus's family had never intended her to bear. All this time, she had thought she was honoring his memory by avoiding the work that had led to his death, when really, she could honor him much better by continuing to help others safely explore the wilderness he had loved so passionately. She walked to her window and looked out at the mountain peaks surrounding Millbrook, their snow-covered summits glowing pink in the sunset light. Tomorrow, she would lead another group of eager students on a challenging camping expedition. This weekend, she would participate in an advanced search and rescue training exercise. Next month, she would begin teaching specialized wilderness skills to regional emergency responders. Not because she had to fulfill obligations, but because she could make a real difference. Because her community genuinely needed those skills. And because helping others achieve meaningful challenges safely was simply what she did best. The postal truck would still need daily driving, and mail would still require reliable delivery. But now those familiar tasks were integral parts of a much larger mission. Staying closely connected to her community, identifying needs before they became crises, and using all her skills, both old and newly developed, to make life better and safer for everyone around her. She folded Jennifer's letter carefully and placed it in the box with her other precious mementos. But this time, instead of closing the box and storing it away, she left it open on her desk where she could see it every day. Some memories were meant to be kept close, not because they caused ongoing pain, but because they reminded you of who you were meant to be and what really mattered in life. Outside her window, the mountains stood silent and eternal, holding their secrets and their dangers, waiting patiently for the next group of adventurers who would need someone knowledgeable and careful to guide them safely through the wilderness. Denise smiled and began planning next week's advanced rescue training session with genuine enthusiasm. There was important work to do, and she was exactly where she belonged. 2 years later, the Millbrook Outdoor Education Center had successfully trained over 500 people in various wilderness skills, coordinated 23 successful search and rescue operations, and established educational partnerships with outdoor programs throughout the entire region. Denise still delivered mail every morning with the same dedication as always, but now, her postal truck also carried comprehensive emergency medical supplies, and her daily route included regular safety checks on isolated residents throughout the valley. She had become the informal emergency coordinator for the entire area, someone who knew every trail, every potential hazard, and every person who might need help during a crisis. On what would have been Marcus Thompson's 47th birthday, Denise led a memorial climbing expedition to Eagle Point, with a diverse group that included his sister Jennifer, several of his old climbing partners, and a dozen current students from Millbrook High School. At the scenic summit, they observed a respectful minute of silence for all the climbers and outdoor enthusiasts who had died pursuing their passion in the mountains. Then Jennifer read aloud a meaningful quote from Marcus's personal journal. The mountains don't care about our plans, our fears, or our ambitions. They simply exist, beautiful and dangerous and eternal. Our job is not to eliminate all the danger, but to approach it with proper knowledge, thorough preparation, and deep respect. As the group began their careful descent, one of the high school students asked Denise thoughtfully, "Do you think Mr. Thompson would be proud of everything you've accomplished here in Millbrook?" Denise looked back at the majestic peak they had just submitted together, thinking about all the people she had helped learn essential outdoor skills, all the successful rescue operations, all the lives that had been enriched and made safer by access to well-supervised wilderness experiences. "I think he would be proud that I finally stopped hiding from the work I was truly meant to do," she said with quiet confidence. "And I think he would be genuinely happy to know that his tragic accident ultimately taught me the crucial difference between avoiding reasonable risks and avoiding meaningful purpose." The descent proceeded slowly and carefully, with frequent stops to teach proper technique and check on all group members, exactly the way Marcus would have wanted it conducted. At the trailhead, as students loaded into the school van for the drive back to town, Jennifer Thompson approached Denise one final time. "Thank you," she said simply but with deep emotion, "for honoring his memory in exactly the right way. Thank you for sending the letter that helped me find my way back to who I really am." "So what's next for the famous postal worker who saves people?" Denise laughed warmly and looked toward the towering mountains, where new challenges and opportunities waited endlessly. More mail to deliver reliably, more students to teach and inspire, more rescue operations to coordinate successfully. Essentially, the same meaningful work I've been doing, just with a much better understanding of why I'm doing it and how it all fits together. As the vehicles drove away down the winding mountain road, Denise stood alone in the parking lot for a peaceful moment, breathing the clean mountain air and listening to the profound silence that had once frightened her, but now felt like coming home. Tomorrow would bring fresh mail to deliver, new students eager to learn, and innovative ways to serve her community's evolving needs. She had discovered her true purpose not by seeking grand adventures in distant places, but by using her specialized skills to make ordinary life safer, more meaningful, and more connected for the people around her. Sometimes the greatest heroism is simply showing up consistently, day after day, ready and willing to help however you can with whatever skills you possess. The postwoman's promise had evolved into something far more significant than just delivering mail reliably. It had become a comprehensive commitment to serve, protect, and guide, whether the destination was a remote mountaintop or simply the front door of a neighbor who needed to know that someone cared enough to notice and help. And in the small mountain town called Millbrook, that promise was kept faithfully every single day, creating ripples of safety, knowledge, and community connection that would last for generations to come. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most. And where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.